Did you see that? On the stairs.
I think so. A woman in a dress?
She was floating. She looked right at us.
But there's no one there now. She's gone.
Was that the bride they talk about?
I don't want to stay here tonight.
Nestled within Alberta's towering Rockies, Banff is a jewel in Canada's crown. Known for its turquoise lakes, snow-capped peaks, and endless trails through pine-scented air, Banff is where nature's grandeur meets the spirit of adventure. It is a place where elk wander through town streets at dawn and where the crisp mountain air feels like a promise of discovery. Visitors come from around the world to witness the magic of Banff National Park, its glacial lakes, hot springs, and the comforting hush of fresh snow falling on forested trails. Yet amidst this landscape of wild beauty stands a castle of stone and shadow, the Banff Springs Hotel. Regal and commanding, the hotel has been called the Castle in the Rockies, offering visitors luxury and history in equal measure. Its grand halls have hosted royalty, dignitaries, artists, and travelers seeking to embrace the splendor of the Canadian wilderness, while wrapped in the warmth of its fireside lounges. But beneath its grandeur, the Banff Springs Hotel holds secrets whispered across generations. Footsteps echo down empty corridors. Shadows flit past the corner of one's eye. A chill lingers in the air long after the wind has died. Locals and visitors alike speak of strange happenings, of voices in the dark and figures that vanish without a sound. It is said that within these walls the past has never truly left, and some guests have checked in, only to remain forever. This is the story of Canada's most haunted hotel, a place where the beauty of Banff meets the mystery of the unseen, where legends walk quietly beside the living, and where the line between memory and haunting is as thin as the mountain mist. The past doesn't sleep. It lingers. In ash and iron, in whispers behind ruined walls, buried in silence, are stories left untold, echoes of those who vanished, voices lost to time. But the archive remembers. This is where history breathes again. This is Archived Stories, because some stories were never meant to be forgotten. In 1888, as Canada was still stitching together its young confederation, the Canadian Pacific Railway launched a grand endeavor, not merely to transport people, but to awe them. At the edge of the Bow River, where glaciers fed icy waters through pine-laced valleys, they built a hotel unlike any the country had ever seen. Designed in the Scottish baronial style and perched like a king upon a throne of wilderness, the Banff Springs Hotel was more than accommodation. It was ambition carved in stone. The vision belonged to William Cornelius Van Horn, general manager of the CPR, who famously declared, "If we can't export the scenery, we'll import the tourists." He meant it. The hotel, once completed, stood as a gateway to the sublime, inviting the wealthy and the worldly to experience the untouched grandeur of the Canadian Rockies. Royals, Hollywood stars, and business tycoons passed through its heavy oak doors, enchanted by its blend of wild isolation and refined opulence. But grandeur often casts a long shadow. From the very beginning, the Banff Springs seemed entangled in unusual happenings. The original wooden structure suffered from a series of misfortunes, including fires and structural changes that altered the hotel's blueprint in curious ways. One of the earliest stories involved the architect, who allegedly discovered too late that the hotel had been constructed backward, with its most stunning mountain views facing away from the guest rooms. Though official records contest this, the story persisted among staff, becoming one of the first strange legends tied to the hotel's name. The hotel underwent a dramatic transformation in the 1920s, when it was rebuilt in stone to match the Gothic majesty of European castles. With spires, turrets, and long echoing halls, the new structure felt timeless, as if it had always been there, watching. As the hotel grew, so too did the whispers. Staff quietly exchanged tales in the back corridors. Some guests mentioned uneasy feelings in certain rooms. A maid reported seeing a woman vanish into a wall. A bellhop refused to go to the 7th floor at night. Most guests laughed it off, superstitions surely, and yet as the decades passed, the stories became more detailed, more frequent, harder to ignore. The Banff Springs Hotel became a place where luxury met legend, and every marble column seemed to bear witness to something unseen. By the mid-20th century, it had earned a new title alongside its official name, the most haunted hotel in Canada. Still, the guests came, they always did. For while some sought comfort, others came for something else, something the hotel never advertised, yet never denied, a brush with the unknown. The grandeur of Banff Springs is unquestionable. Towering stone arches, sweeping staircases, gilded chandeliers, but behind its regal beauty lies something more elusive, something colder. For those who have worked its halls and stayed within its rooms, there is a common thread, a feeling, faint but persistent, that they are not alone. Long before the hotel gained fame as a haunt for ghost hunters and travel bloggers, it had already become a quiet legend among its own staff. Maids, porters, and night clerks, those who wandered the hotel's back corridors when no guests were around, spoke of strange sounds and unexplained sensations. A tapping on the shoulder in an empty hallway, footsteps echoing behind them with no visible source, the faint sound of a child crying from an unoccupied floor. At first, these were only whispers, shared over cleaning carts or behind the front desk during late-night shifts. But as the stories mounted, so did the conviction. Something or someone was lingering. Guests, too, added their voices to the mystery. Some reported phones ringing in their rooms in the middle of the night, only to pick up and find silence. Others spoke of a pressure in the air, a heaviness that seemed to follow them down certain hallways. In some cases it was a chill, unexplainable, sudden, and out of place in a centrally heated building. Guests would sometimes check out early, offering no explanation beyond the words. It just didn't feel right. The hotel management, maintaining the luxury brand, rarely acknowledged the tales, though many believed they knew more than they admitted. Over time, a few staff were quietly reassigned away from certain areas, rooms that guests refused to sleep in twice. In particular, the 8th floor became known as the floor of silence, where no one lingered longer than necessary, and night shifts were always filled reluctantly. One such story dates back to the 1950s, when a night porter named George allegedly encountered a shadowy figure in the ballroom after hours. Assuming it was a trespasser or drunk guest, he approached the figure, only for it to vanish through the closed doors without a sound. George resigned that same week. His story was never reported publicly, but became part of the hotel's unofficial lore. Then came the tale of the elevator. A couple on their honeymoon in the 1970s reported pressing the button for the lobby, only for the elevator to stop inexplicably on the 7th floor. The doors opened and a woman in a wedding dress stood waiting. They assumed she was part of a themed event and invited her in. She did not respond. She simply turned, glided down the hallway, and disappeared through a locked service door. When they mentioned it to the front desk, the clerk grew quiet. "We don't have any weddings scheduled this week," he said. Such incidents, though dismissed as overactive imaginations or mere coincidence, became a pattern. The hotel had acquired a reputation, not just among ghost story enthusiasts, but among serious paranormal researchers. Investigators with infrared cameras, EMF detectors, and audio equipment began arriving discreetly, often posing as guests. What they recorded varied: strange energy fluctuations, unexplained temperature drops, electronic interference. But the most chilling of all were the voices. Low, indistinct, almost a whisper, as if the walls themselves were remembering things long forgotten. For those who came to Banff Springs seeking luxury, they found it. But for those who stayed still in the quiet hours, after the last piano note had faded and the firelight dimmed, they sometimes heard something else. A voice, a footstep, a sigh. The hallways of Banff Springs were never truly silent. Of all the ghosts said to dwell within the Banff Springs Hotel, none is as enduring or as tragic as the bride on the staircase. Her story has been told and retold across generations, her image captured in paintings, whispered about by staff, and even reenacted in the hotel's ghost tours. Yet no one knows her name, only her sorrow. The legend begins in the 1930s. A young bride, vibrant and full of joy, was preparing for the happiest day of her life. She and her fiancé had chosen Banff Springs for their wedding, drawn by its romantic setting, towering peaks, and the fairy tale grandeur of its halls. The ceremony, by all accounts, was a grand affair. Guests in fine clothing, music echoing through the ballroom, champagne glasses clinking under crystal chandeliers. But something went wrong. As the story goes, the bride, still in her gown, veil trailing behind her, was descending the grand marble staircase when disaster struck. The details vary. Some say she tripped on the hem of her dress. Others say she was startled by a gust of wind that blew a candle's flame too close to her veil. One version claims she turned too quickly and caught her heel in the train. Whatever the cause, the outcome was the same: a fall down the long staircase, a broken neck. Her life extinguished in a moment. The celebration turned to horror. The ballroom was silenced. The groom, stricken with grief, is said to have left the hotel and never returned. Her family arranged a quiet removal of the body. No record of the incident exists in the official registry. No obituary, no newspaper article, no death certificate. But the story persisted, and so did she. Guests began reporting sightings of a woman in a flowing white dress gliding through the halls. Sometimes she was seen on the staircase, clutching at the air as if reliving the moment she fell. Other times she would appear in the ballroom, dancing alone beneath the chandeliers, the hem of her dress floating as though carried by an unseen wind. The most unnerving reports came from those who claimed the bride did not always appear whole. Some saw her veil floating, her face obscured by shadow. Others said her neck hung at an unnatural angle, her head tilted as if still bearing the mark of the fall. And yet, her presence did not inspire fear in most, only sadness. A quiet, lingering grief that seemed to echo in the silence after she vanished. Hotel staff in the mid-20th century tried to explain the sightings. Tricks of the light, they said. Overactive imaginations. But even they grew uneasy. A chambermaid once claimed to find rose petals scattered on the staircase with no event booked that day. A night manager locked the ballroom after hours, only to find music playing faintly when he passed by again later. The room was still locked. In time, the hotel leaned into the legend. A painted mural of the ghostly bride was installed in one of the guest areas. Her story became part of the hotel's folklore, an elegant spectre of heartbreak. But behind the theatrical retellings was something deeper, a mystery that never found closure. Who was she? Was there truly a bride who died on her wedding day within those walls? Or had grief etched itself so deeply into the architecture that the story became real? Guests still ask about her, some even claim to see her. A white figure descending the stairs, silent, searching, not for vengeance, not even for peace, just for the moment she lost, frozen in time at the top of a marble staircase. There is a corridor on the 8th floor of the Banff Springs Hotel that seems ordinary at first glance. Long, softly lit, lined with doors like any other hallway. But attentive guests have noticed something peculiar. There is no room 873, room 871, room 875, and nothing in between. No door, no number, just an unbroken stretch of wall where a room should be. The story of room 873 is perhaps the most infamous of all the hotel's mysteries, and unlike the ghost bride or phantom bellhop, this legend hinges not on visible specters, but on something far more unsettling. What is missing? According to persistent rumor, decades ago, a young family was staying in room 873. No names were ever confirmed, no date ever fixed, but the tale remains chillingly consistent. One night, for reasons unknown, the father allegedly murdered his wife and young daughter before taking his own life. The room was sealed off for investigation, and when it reopened months later, something had changed. Guests who stayed there began reporting strange disturbances, flickering lights, cold spots, the feeling of being watched. Most disturbingly, some claimed to see the image of a small girl's hand pressed against the mirror, no matter how often it was cleaned. Night after night, the imprint would return. Others heard muffled crying or knocking from inside the walls. More than one guest left in the middle of the night, refusing to stay another hour. A cleaning crew once refused to service the room altogether. The hotel, aiming to preserve its reputation, supposedly took the matter into its own hands. The decision was made, they say, to brick over the doorway and quietly remove room 873 from existence. The space was either sealed permanently or absorbed into neighboring suites, but the hallway was left with an eerie discontinuity, 2 room numbers that should not be adjacent, and a lingering question: what happened behind that vanished door? Hotel management, when asked directly, offers a practiced answer: there is no room 873. Some guests have been told the room never existed. Others are told it was combined into a larger suite. But for those who have seen the layout of the original floors, or who have examined the architectural symmetry of the hotel, it's clear that something is missing. The measurements don't lie. Over the years, guests have tested the myth for themselves. Some knock on the wall between rooms 871 and 875, only to hear a faint echo, a hollow sound, as though something lies behind the plaster. One man in the early 2000s brought a portable infrared thermometer to the corridor and claimed that the wall where room 873 should be was consistently colder than the rest. Paranormal investigators have tried to gain access to the space. All requests have been denied. To this day, the hotel officially denies that anything unusual occurred in room 873, but the legend endures. Tour guides speak of it in hushed tones, Long-time employees lower their voices when asked. And the wall, pristine, solid and silent, stands as a quiet monument to a mystery the hotel will neither confirm nor explain. Whatever happened in room 873, it left a scar not just on the hotel, but in the memory of those who believe the truth was buried behind bricks and silence. The Banff Springs Hotel has seen countless staff members come and go over the decades. Porters, maids, bellhops, cooks, managers. But if the stories are to be believed, not all of them have truly left. Among the many ghost stories whispered through the halls, some of the most curious and oddly comforting concern the lingering presence of long-departed staff members. Of these, one name stands out above the rest: Sam the Bellman. Sam Macaulay, as some believe him to have been called, was a Scottish bellhop who worked at the Banff Springs Hotel in the 1960s and 70s. He was known for his impeccable manners, old-world charm, and an unwavering dedication to service. Long after his retirement, and by some accounts long after his death, guests began reporting encounters with a helpful elderly porter who bore a striking resemblance to Sam. The stories followed a pattern. A guest would arrive late at night, luggage in hand, only to find an elderly man in a dated uniform already waiting for them. He would escort them to their room, offer assistance, and vanish before they could tip him. When they later asked about the porter at the front desk, they would be met with confusion. No such employee had been on shift that night. Several accounts describe the same eerie detail. The man would disappear, literally vanish, after closing the door behind him. Not down the hall, not into another room, just gone. Sam is not the only phantom staff member believed to haunt the hotel. Cleaning staff have shared stories of cold drafts blowing through sealed windows, linens being smoothed by unseen hands, and carts moving on their own. In one case, a maid claimed that she returned to a room she had just left, only to find the bed perfectly made and the lights dimmed, just as guests preferred it. No one else had a key. No one had entered. Security staff, too, have felt the weight of something unseen. One guard recounted his patrol in the early hours of the morning. As he passed through a side hallway, he saw a figure out of the corner of his eye, tall, dressed in dark formal wear. When he turned, the hallway was empty. When he checked the cameras, that section had recorded only static. Elevators are another source of strangeness. Sometimes they arrive at floors without being summoned. Other times they stop at levels that were never selected. On more than one occasion, guests have claimed to ride with a silent man in uniform who, midway through the descent, simply was no longer there. Despite the unsettling nature of these stories, most guests don't report fear, only surprise. The ghostly staff, it seems, are still dutiful in the afterlife, their service impeccable, their presence subtle. But it raises a question that lingers like fog in the minds of those who know the stories. Why do they remain? Are they bound to the place by routine, by loyalty, by something left unfinished? Or is it that the Banff Springs Hotel, with its timeless architecture and air of old-world elegance, never quite lets go of the people who've called it home? In a place where the past never truly departs, perhaps the line between the living and the dead is thinner than it seems. For every spine-chilling tale that echoes through the stone corridors of the Banff Springs Hotel, there is another voice, calm, rational, and unconvinced. The skeptics, scientists, historians, and psychologists have long attempted to deconstruct the legends that have cemented Banff Springs as Canada's most haunted hotel. And in truth, they offer explanations that on the surface are difficult to refute. The first is environmental. The Banff Springs Hotel is over a century old, built with thick stone walls and labyrinthine passages. These structures, some argue, are prime candidates for auditory illusions, echoes, creaks, shifting floorboards, all perfectly explainable in buildings of such age and scale. Drafts from poorly sealed windows or hidden vents might explain sudden cold spots. Temperature fluctuations could create unsettling sensations on the skin. Others point to the psychological. When a location is associated with ghost stories, especially one as famous as Banff Springs, guests arrive already primed for the paranormal. This phenomenon, known as expectancy bias, can cause individuals to interpret natural occurrences through a supernatural lens. A flickering light becomes a signal. A creaking stair becomes a ghost. Shadows take on more sinister shapes when the mind is prepared to find them. Still more point to sleep-related phenomena. Hotels are notorious for disrupting sleep schedules. Unfamiliar beds, changes in altitude, and even mild dehydration can lead to episodes of sleep paralysis, a state in which a person wakes but cannot move, often accompanied by hallucinations, feelings of dread, or a sensed presence. Many accounts of ghostly encounters mirror these exact symptoms. Historians too question the origins of certain stories. No official death records exist for a bride falling on the staircase. The murder in room 873, no police reports, no coroner's notes, no public news articles. Urban legends, they say. Embellishments passed down and reshaped with each retelling. And yet, there remains a stubborn undercurrent, an unexplainable residue that clings to the place. Paranormal investigators, both amateur and professional, have visited Banff Springs for decades. Some bring electromagnetic field meters, thermal cameras, and digital voice recorders. A few claim to have captured voices in the silence, unmistakable murmurs, sobs, or names. Others speak of anomalies in photographs, faces where there should be none, lights with no source, or shadowy figures just beyond focus. There's also the matter of consistency. Across decades and continents, strangers who have never spoken to one another describe the same entities. A bride on the staircase, a helpful bellman, a little girl pressing her hand to the mirror. Too specific, some argue, to be coincidence. Even some skeptics admit, quietly, reluctantly, that Banff Springs feels different. Not malevolent, not evil, but heavy, like memory made solid, a place where time feels suspended and the air carries more than oxygen. Perhaps the most compelling evidence is not what is seen or recorded, but what is felt. Because something lingers in the Banff Springs Hotel, something unquantifiable. It is in the hush of the hallways, the hush just beyond the voices of tourists and the clink of silverware. It is in the moments between footsteps. In the silence after the elevator door closes. In the mirror just before you turn away. Science explains much, but not everything. And in that space between reason and mystery, the ghosts of Banff Springs endure.